Okay, so for the last video, I'm gonna kind of work you through deciding which method you need to use to solve these equations because there's different avenues you can take. So I constructed a little flowchart to help you kind of determine what you need to do depending on what the question's asking you. And so for step one, you're gonna ask yourself the question, are you being asked to find an initial value? If you are, then you're going to go and substitute in for the variable x is equal to 0. It will not always be x. It could be t for time. It could be some other measurement. But if it's typically associated with x, it'll be the term that's squared in the formula. And if they ask for the initial value, you'll just substitute 0 for that term and you'll solve it. Are you being asked for a max or minimum? So if you're asked for a max or minimum, these are generally vertice questions. And so that's why the answer to that question is yes, is it associated with the x item, the x term? Then if it's yes, you'll do the vertex formula for x is equal to negative b over 2a. And if the answer to that is no, you'll use x is equal to negative b over 2a anyway, and then you'll just substitute that value that you get in for x and determine what y is. So that would be, this gives the vertex value for y, and this is the vertex for x. I kind of wrote sloppy. Let me write that nicer. So vertex x and vertex y. So if you're not being asked for a max or minimum, are you being asked about the y value reaching 0? That would be when, like in the last problem, the height was equal to 0 because the ball was thrown and it hit the ground. So it says use some method of factoring to get a solution. You can use factoring, quadratic formula. You can use completing the square, or you can use graphing, anything to get that one for that one. So if you have y is equal to 0, that's when you use factoring. Are you being asked to, and then finally, are you being asked to calculate a specific value? If the answer is the value associated, obviously since that's the only one left, the only answer is yes. Is the value associated with the x variable? If it is, plug it in for x and solve for y. If it isn't, plug it in for y and solve for x. That can mean that you are factoring. That can mean that you're doing arithmetic. It just depends on what you're looking at. So let's look at a problem up here, or a couple of these. I suggest writing down this stuff, so maybe pause the video and write down what is written in the bubbles so you have the flow chart. Number one says the number of board feet in a 16-foot long tree is approximated by the model. Floorboard is equal to d squared minus this. Okay, so I'm just looking at the formula. It's not the numbers don't matter so much, but where f is the number of feet and d is the diameter of the log. How many board feet, that's f, are in a log with diameter of 12 inches? So that's the first question. So are you being asked to find an initial value? I think the answer here is no, because they're telling you the diameter is 12 inches. So that would fall into, are you being asked for a maximum or minimum? Well, the first part of the question does not say anything about max or min, so we go to the next one. This would be no down here. Are you being asked about the y value reaching 0? I think, again, the answer is no, because you're just being told the board feet is 12. So are you being asked to calculate a specific value? The answer is yes. Is it associated with the x variable? Let's look at what they gave us. Well, if you look at the problem, they gave you a diameter of 12 inches. Well, d is associated with the x variable. So the answer there is yes. So what you would do is you would go yes, you'd plug it in for x and then solve for y. So if you wanted to do that, just plug that in for x. 12 into d, and then just use a calculator to get that. You will want to use a calculator for this. And then for part 2, it says, what is the diameter that will produce a minimum number of board feet? So they want to know the diameter, which is an x value, and a minimum, so that's going to be, we're going to go here. Are you being asked to find an initial value? No. Are you being asked to find a max or minimum? Yes. Is it associated with the x term? The answer is yes. So you're just going to use this formula to figure out the number of board feet, or I'm sorry, the diameter that produces a minimum number of board feet. Okay. If we look at the next problem, how much horsepower is needed to overcome a wind drag on this car if the car is traveling 50 miles per hour? So they've given you a value. S is obviously the speed. NS is the horsepower, number of horsepower. And so if we wanted to use this, we're being given a speed. So we're answering no to the first one, the second one, the third one, and then we are being asked to calculate a specific value. Is the value associated with the x variable? Well, since S is the speed and we are given a speed of 50 miles per hour, the answer to that one would be yes. And so plug that in for x and then solve for y. We would do that. And then at what speed will the car need to go 200 horsepower to overcome the wind drag? So once again, if we followed the flow chart, are you being asked for an initial value? No. Are you being asked for a minimum? No. Are you being asked about the y value reaching 0? The answer is no again, because we are given y is 200. Are you being asked to calculate a specific value? Yes. Is the value associated with the x value variable? No, it's the y value, and then you plug it in for y, and then you solve for x. That would end up being like a factoring problem. So I hope this helps you guys. Make sure you try these. I haven't actually worked these out, but it shouldn't be that difficult. Definitely check with each other and see if you get the same answer. If you do, I'm assuming that you guys will have done it right, although you may have different answers if you round differently. So maybe it would be wise to just use all the coefficient, or I'm sorry, all of the decimal places. Don't round anything. Just use all of the decimal places when you're plugging things into the calculator and doing those things. I hope this video helps, guys. This shouldn't be that difficult, I hope. It can be challenging to figure out what they're asking because sometimes the questions are worded weird, but I think you guys can handle this. Thank you, guys. I hope you're doing well.